I didn't ruin my life in one bad decision. I ruined it carefully. Slowly. Politely. I chose the safe option so many times that eventually it became the only option I knew how to take. When people ask how I ended up here, I don't know what to answer. There was no accident. No dramatic failure. Just years of choosing what felt acceptable over what felt true. For a long time, I thought fear was something loud. Panic. Trembling. Running away. But the fear that shaped my life was quiet. It sounded like reason. It wore the voice of responsibility. It told me to wait a little longer, to be grateful, to not ask for too much. And I listened. I always listened. I learned early how to be the version of myself that caused the least disruption. I paid attention to what people expected and adjusted accordingly. I became reliable, predictable, easy to place in a room. People trusted me. They depended on me. They described me with words like stable and grounded. I took those words as compliments, even though something inside me flinched every time I heard them. The truth is, stability can be a cage when you never chose it freely. There were moments when I felt the weight of it clearly. Standing in a crowded room, surrounded by people I had known for years, feeling strangely invisible. Listening to conversations I had already heard before, laughing at the right moments, contributing nothing that felt like it belonged to me. I would go home afterward and sit in silence, exhausted by a performance no one had asked me to give. I told myself this was adulthood. That dreams were for younger versions of ourselves, and maturity meant learning how to let them go. I repeated that story until it almost sounded believable. Almost. Sometimes, late at night, when everything was quiet enough to feel dangerous, memories would surface. Not regrets exactly. Possibilities. The paths I didn't take because they felt uncertain. The words I didn't say because they might have changed things. I imagined parallel versions of myself living braver lives, and instead of inspiration, I felt shame. Shame for still wanting more. I stayed because leaving felt selfish. Because other people were comfortable with the role I played. Because I had invested so much time that walking away felt like admitting I had wasted it. I stayed because I didn't know who I would be without the structure of expectations holding me in place. And slowly, without noticing, I stopped asking myself what I wanted. That question began to feel inappropriate, almost childish. Wanting things became something I associated with disappointment. So I trained myself not to want. Or at least, not to admit it. The first crack appeared in the most ordinary way. Someone asked me where I saw myself in 5 years. I opened my mouth to answer, and nothing came out. My mind reached for images and found only repetition. The same days, the same habits, the same quiet resignation stretching forward without variation. I laughed it off, made a joke, changed the subject. But the question followed me home. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the life I had built. It wasn't terrible. That was the problem. It was tolerable. Comfortable enough to stay. Empty enough to suffocate me slowly. I realized that if nothing changed, this was it. This was the full version of my existence. Not a chapter. Not a phase. A conclusion written in advance. I felt something close to panic then. Not because I was unhappy, but because I was numb. Because I had learned how to live without feeling fully present. Because I had confused endurance with purpose. From that point on, something shifted inside me. I started noticing how often I agreed automatically. How often I dismissed my own discomfort. How often I postponed living in the name of maintaining peace. Every small moment added up, forming a pattern I could no longer unsee. I wanted to believe I could fix it without changing anything. That I could feel different while staying the same. But deep down, I knew better. You don't reclaim a life by adjusting the surface. you reclaim it by risking everything underneath. Still, I didn't leave right away. Fear doesn't release its grip easily. It tightens, tests you, reminds you of everything you could lose. I stayed, caught between the life I had built and the life I hadn't lived, unable to move in either direction. And that was the moment I understood the darkest truth of all. I wasn't afraid of failing. I was afraid of choosing myself and discovering it was too late. Once the question entered my mind, it refused to leave. I carried it with me through ordinary days, like a quiet echo behind every conversation. What if this isn't enough? What if this isn't who I am? I tried to silence it by staying busy, by filling my schedule with responsibilities that made me feel useful. But usefulness is a poor substitute for meaning. It keeps you occupied while slowly draining everything else. I began to notice how much of my life was built around avoidance. Avoiding conflict. Avoiding disappointment. Avoiding the possibility that I had chosen safety at the cost of myself. I told myself that other people had it worse, that gratitude should cancel dissatisfaction. But comparison didn't bring peace. It brought guilt. And guilt is an excellent tool for self-betrayal. The moral dilemma became impossible to ignore. If I left, I would hurt people who trusted me, people who had done nothing wrong. If I stayed, I would continue lying, quietly, to everyone including myself. I weighed these outcomes endlessly, searching for a version of the future where no one suffered. It didn't exist. There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being surrounded by people who don't know the real you. I felt it most in moments of celebration. Smiles felt heavy. Compliments felt misplaced. I accepted praise for a life I no longer believed in. Each time, something inside me retreated further, as if bracing for impact. At night, my thoughts became darker. Not dramatic, not dangerous, just empty. I wondered if this numbness was the final stage. If this was what it meant to settle into adulthood fully. The idea that this might be the rest of my life didn't scare me as much as it should have. That terrified me. I tried small rebellions. Saying no when I usually said yes. Choosing silence instead of polite agreement. Taking walks without destinations. These moments felt insignificant, but they revealed how tightly controlled my life had become. Freedom, even in small doses, felt unfamiliar. Almost threatening. People noticed. They always do when you stop playing your role perfectly. They asked if something was wrong, if I was tired, if I needed a break. I gave them half-truths. I said I was just thinking a lot. Which was true. I was thinking about leaving a life I had spent years defending. Fear didn't disappear. It evolved. It stopped shouting and started negotiating. Maybe I could stay and redefine things. Maybe I could be content if I adjusted my expectations. Maybe this feeling would pass. Fear is persuasive when it sounds reasonable. But then came the realization that ended the negotiation. I wasn't unhappy because of circumstances. I was unhappy because I wasn't living honestly. No change that avoided that truth would ever be enough. I started preparing quietly. Not in a practical sense at first, but internally. I imagined what it would mean to walk away without a clear destination. I imagined the conversations I would never have, the explanations I would never give. The idea felt both cruel and merciful. Cruel to others. Merciful to myself. One evening, alone, I admitted something I had never said out loud before. I had stayed not out of love, but out of fear of being seen as the person who gave up. That admission stripped away the last illusion I had been protecting. Staying wasn't noble. It was easier. From that moment on, the collapse accelerated. Every familiar space felt temporary. Every routine felt rehearsed. I moved through my days with the strange awareness that I was already leaving, even if my body hadn't caught up yet. The decision, when it finally came, wasn't dramatic. It arrived quietly, like acceptance. I understood that no one was going to give me permission. That no perfect moment would appear. If I waited for certainty, I would stay forever. So I chose uncertainty. Not because it promised happiness, but because it offered honesty. The day I finally left didn't feel brave. It felt heavy. Every step carried the weight of all the years I had postponed this moment. I didn't announce anything. I didn't make a speech or wait for understanding. I had learned by then that explanations are often just another way to delay the inevitable. I left quietly, carrying only what I could hold without dragging my past behind me. At first, the absence was disorienting. Without the familiar structure of my old life, time stretched and folded in on itself. Mornings arrived without purpose, evenings passed without markers. Freedom didn't feel like relief yet. It felt like exposure. When you remove the roles that once defined you, you're left with questions you can no longer ignore. I missed people I didn't want to return to. That contradiction surprised me. Leaving doesn't erase attachment. It simply changes its shape. I carried memories with me like ghosts, appearing unexpectedly in ordinary moments. A phrase, a sound, a place, and suddenly I was mourning a life that no longer fit me. Grief doesn't always mean you made the wrong choice. Sometimes it means you finally made an honest one. There were moments of panic. Standing in unfamiliar places, surrounded by strangers, I wondered if I had made a mistake. The safety of my old life tempted me then, appearing kinder in retrospect. Fear has a way of rewriting history when the present feels unstable. But each time doubt rose, I returned to the same truth. Staying would have required me to keep disappearing. Starting over didn't transform me overnight. I didn't become confident or fearless. I became attentive. I listened to my discomfort instead of silencing it. I noticed when something drained me instead of enduring it out of habit. These small acts felt radical after years of self-denial. I learned that identity isn't something you discover all at once. It's something you practice. Every honest choice, no matter how small, reinforces who you are becoming. I stopped measuring my worth by how acceptable I was to others. I stopped apologizing for needing space. I stopped mistaking endurance for virtue. There is a quiet loneliness that comes with choosing yourself. Not everyone will understand your absence. Some will interpret it as rejection. Others will reduce it to weakness. You don't get to control those narratives. You only get to decide whether you will keep living one that isn't yours. I don't know where this path will lead. My life now is smaller, simpler, less impressive by most standards. But it's mine. I wake up without rehearsing my day in someone else's voice. I make decisions without asking whether they will disappoint an invisible audience. Looking back, I understand something I couldn't see before. I didn't waste those years entirely. They taught me what happens when you postpone your truth long enough. They taught me that comfort can be more dangerous than pain. That the greatest loss isn't failure, but never choosing at all. If there's a final confession in all of this, it's this. I lived the life I was afraid to leave. And leaving didn't give me everything I hoped for. It gave me something better. The chance to stop running from myself.